It has been a long wait, but the latest game in the Metro series is finally here. I've been anticipating Metro Exodus for some time now, and it seems like with this release, 4A Games and the Metro series is finally getting the attention that it deserves. The first two games have an established, almost cult-like following, and for good reason. When Metro 2033 released years ago, it pushed PCs of the time to their absolute limits. The game's atmosphere was second to none, and from there, coupled with a compelling storyline and survival mechanics that were a departure from your average first-person shooter, a new series was born. Metro Exodus, however, represents a departure from the established, claustrophobic, and atmospheric formula of the previous two games. It aims to provide the same sense of unease, but that is much harder to do in a semi-open world environment. The result is a much more non-linear experience that ends up sacrificing some of the things that made the first two games great. 4A Games does an admirable job of still attempting to put you in somewhat scripted, smaller areas to maintain some of the tense moments you've come to expect from the series. Metro Exodus starts off in a linear fashion, but once you get past the opening area, it essentially changes into an open world game. There are 3 open world environments to explore and complete quests in. These quests will have you adding new characters to your party, retrieving items for them, or otherwise have you performing some action needed to advance the main story. Once it became apparent that Metro Exodus was not aiming to provide the same kind of experience that the previous games did, I forced myself to judge it on its own merits rather than on the existing series. What we have here instead is a reimagining of the Metro world with a familiar character. One of my favorite aspects of the Metro series is the attention to detail 4A Games puts into conversations between characters. Metro Exodus is even better than either of the previous games in this respect. Many times you can just listen to two people go on about any number of topics for minutes on end. The voice acting is generally pretty good, and I enjoy just listening to the banter between these characters as they go about their day. I can't imagine the volumes of text Metro Exodus has, and on top of that, the character animations are leaps and bounds better than the previous Metro games. As the game progresses, you learn more about each character, and by the end they are almost like a family. You really care about them, they say funny things, they will confide in you and in each other. I particularly liked some of Sam's lines, as an American out of place in Russia.
So Sam, tell me what the real enemy bases look like so that we know when we see it.
Well, first of all, there are these huge humanoid robots, all plastered with stars and stripes, with nuclear reactors up their asses. Oh, and the food's great. Burgers, fries, shakes.
Nah, I'm being serious. What the hell?
Okay, well let me be serious too. How the hell am I supposed to know how they look now? I haven't seen one in, what, 20 years or so?
One thing that bothered me was that your main character, Artyom, would narrate the story during loading sequences, but then during actual gameplay he never actually talks. Characters will have an entire conversation with you to which Artyom doesn't respond. I don't know if it is just implied, but there would be harrowing sequences where you're out of communication, and once you emerge, your wife is talking to you with so much relief and excitement in her voice that you're okay, to which you do not respond. It is strange, and I never got used to it. In Metro Exodus, ammunition is at a premium. There's a very streamlined crafting system in the game that allows you to scavenge materials throughout the world, and ammunition is one of the things you can and must make because it is very scarce. You'd have to take it off of enemies when you eliminate them, but if you're not in an area with human enemies, you'll find that ammunition runs out relatively quickly. On harder difficulties, it is in extremely short supply. Weapons feel great. I enjoyed using each of them in their own way, and Metro Exodus treats weapons and weapon care probably the best I've ever seen in a video game. Red Dead Redemption 2 had a weapons cleaning system that showed you just wiping down the exterior, and it really had no negative effect to the game if your weapon was dirty. In Metro Exodus, it absolutely makes a difference if it is dirty, and just like in real life, when your weapon is dirty, it will jam. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, and 4A Games' recreation of how a weapon reacts when it is jammed is spot on. I appreciate the realism and always made sure that I cleaned my weapons when I was at a workbench. There were a few things that I felt were sort of uninspired though. First were the lightning aberrations. These are enemies that literally appear out of thin air and seem like something that sounds kind of cool, but in reality they are just incredibly annoying. The other one is radioactive barrels. Somehow they end up all over the place in another post-apocalyptic shooter. They are all over Fallout games, and 4A Games has made sure to include them here. I guess when you want to include a heavy dose of radiation, you just plop a radioactive barrel in the ground and there you go. Problem solved. Regarding music, well, there isn't much. What is here is actually pretty good, but the game goes for a more ambient and brooding mix rather than anything that is melodic. I quite enjoy good music in my games, especially open world ones, so this is disappointing. The sound effects are top notch though. You hear every crunch, crackle, and pop of the things you're stepping on as you walk. You can hear creatures howling off in the distance. The world feels very alive and real, and the sound is a big reason why. I highly recommend that you play Metro Exodus with headphones on with the sound pumped up. Quests are handled in an organic way. Characters will ask you to do things for them, and sometimes it is a small request like retrieving a guitar so they can play it, all the way to a main story quest that you didn't realize until you were actually doing it. I liked that I didn't ever have dozens of things I needed to do. Metro Exodus allows for freedom within each sandbox area, but you'll always only have a few things to do on your list. The world is interesting to explore on its own, however I must say that I really did not enjoy the boating sequences in the first area. I know it is a boat, but it was hard to control and just didn't feel right. It is unfortunate because you spend a lot of time boating in the first area. I did quite like how the player's movement is inhibited depending on what you're walking through, or where you are. Walking through a heavily forested area, the trees and bushes will slow you down. The same is true if you're walking through mud. It's a subtle but realistic touch. I don't want to spoil the story, but I did enjoy it. It isn't anything like the previous games, and there's no central villain. It is just you and your party on a journey together. It ends up being memorable mainly because the characters are so great. I'm intentionally showing only the first main area here because the others are thematically and visually much different, so I am trying to minimize spoilers. But graphically, Metro Exodus looks outstanding. I played on an NVIDIA GTX 1060 with 16GB of RAM. This was good enough to play the game at 60 frames per second at ultra settings on a 1080p monitor with all effects on. That said, performance isn't perfect, and there are times where the frame rate will tank inexplicably. This was rare, but it occurred enough times that it is worth mentioning. I also had an instance where the game crashed to the desktop. Luckily, there's a pretty generous autosave function, so anytime something like that happens, or you die, the game will have likely saved within the last 5 minutes. Sometimes textures wouldn't load correctly at full resolution, so a bush or ammunition canister, for example, would quite clearly be very low resolution right in front of you. So I think that there will be some patches coming soon to iron these issues out. Metro Exodus is one of the best looking games I've played in a while, right up there with Red Dead Redemption 2. There are some beautiful vistas later in the game that are well worth seeing. Characters and buildings are incredibly detailed. There are times I would find small touches throughout the game world that many players likely won't ever see. I can't imagine all of the interesting things that I missed. Even the main title screen changes depending on where you are in the game. It will definitely be worth playing the game over again when I have more time to just explore, since I know the full story now. And exploration is well worth your time just to see this post-apocalyptic world that 4A Games has built. It is ambitious, beautiful, and realistic. Overall, I very much enjoyed Metro Exodus. It is well worth the time you will spend in its world with great graphics, memorable characters, and a journey that will take you across an entire continent. There are some nagging issues with performance, and your character being inexplicably silent is unfortunate, but Metro Exodus is a definite purchase if you're even remotely interested in what it has to offer.
While you're inside, that electric tower there looks like a perfect sniping position. Let's go.